Well, while we're waiting for it to come up, morning everybody. But it is an absolute privilege to come along today, just to talk about our learning journey really at St Helens, and how some of those principles may come as part of your career, something that you may want to use. And as we heard this morning, not everything works everywhere. These ideas will be something that you may want to take on board, some questions for thought for you. But a little introduction. I've been head at St Helens since 2010. It's a very, very unique school based in the city centre of Swansea. We have currently, as it says, 34 different nationalities at the school, 23 different languages. There's 90% English as an additional language at the school, which is double anything else, even in the multicultural areas of Swansea. So it is a very, very interesting and very, very dynamic place to work. It was the worst attended school in 2010. Attendance there was at about 87%, which I shudder to think really what that would look like today, or the type of trouble we'd get in if things had stayed at that type of level. But in 2017, it was one of the best 10 attended schools in the city, and we were very, very lucky to be rated as excellent by Eston in 2016. That kind of sets a little context for us, and that's really, really involved a real learning journey for us as a school, and creating a real learning community that we're really, really proud of. I think often people say to us, how do you get an improvement in attendance like that? And as we'll say today, it's just about making learning fun and getting children to actually want to come to school. Context for us, as was said quite rightly earlier, it's not about taking other people's ideas and putting them into your own classroom. It's about finding what works for you. For us, as a school, the question there is, what works is not really the right question, because everything works somewhere, but not everything works everywhere. And I think that's great for you as student teachers, as people who are coming into the profession. It's not about taking other people's ideas and copying them. It's about experimenting, it's about trying new things, and that's the journey that we've really had. Our idea of innovation hasn't been copying what the school does up the road. It's about putting things in context and really, really experimenting and enjoying things that we do. Now, under what conditions does that work? That's really, really important for us. Well, number one, we look at culture continuously. The way that we do things around here, having a consistent way of working. And I think using that word consistent might be argued that stifles creativity. What we have, certainly at the school, is consistency of principle. The principles are the same through the school. The practice that you'll see in each individual classroom will always look different. And that's the same for everybody here today. We don't expect people to be robots in our learning community. Everybody experiments, but the principles that we work to are always the same. We continue to ask ourselves, what's it like to be here? What are the relationships like? And I think if we talk about school improvement, we talk about being a head teacher of a school. As I say, sometimes leading a school is no different to being a teacher really in the classroom. It's just you're dealing with people in bigger clothes. The way that you feel, the way that the children feel is extremely important in the school. Being here, what's it like to be here is a question that we'll ask ourselves continuously. And the climate, very, very important. You can have all of the most wonderful teaching and learning strategies. You can have the most wonderful children coming through the door. But what is it actually like to be in this school when you come through on a day-to-day basis? Do you enjoy? Do you feel comfortable? Extremely important in the learning journey, the learning community that we have. So, for us, the journey has been about a vision. We really need to be up to something. We all know where we're going. Engagement, and we'll talk about that in some of the slides. You cannot do it on your own. You will go out as teachers into a wide variety of different schools, but you will not be expected to do everything on your own. What are you doing to create the learning community? We'll look at some of those things further on. And delivery. Are we really doing what we're expected to be doing? I think Matthew's going to put up some of the things that we've worked on as a staff. difficult to see from there as well, so I'll put it out from here. So some of the mind frames that we have here, some of the questions that we ask, we expect children to be evaluators in their own learning. For us as teachers, are we evaluators ourselves? Do we evaluate what goes on a daily basis? Are we looking at what's working, what's not working? If we expect those skills in children, is that something that we are really working to as well? Feedback is extremely important for us as a school. Feedback, and I think some of the work by John Hart is really, really fantastic on this. And he actually says that the real moment in feedback was when he saw that it wasn't about from teacher to student, but the best feedback is from student to teacher. So do we spend enough time, if we expect children to be, working to feedback, are we taking that back and working on that ourselves? Do we collaborate with others? We expect children to be working as talk partners. We expect them to be working as parts of a group. We expect them to be taking charge of our own learning. Do we collaborate enough? As teachers, do we sit down? And I'm very, very fortunate. I work with Pearson's, national award winners. I work with winners from the Wales National Teaching Awards. Those teachers and teaching assistants work as well with teachers who've just come out of teacher training college. They learn from them. We work together. It's extremely important. Are you a change agent? We expect children to be taking charge of their own learning. Do we? Are we driving the agenda? Are we looking for new things? Are we trying to push ourselves on in our work? Do we challenge? We expect children to challenge themselves. Are we continually challenging themselves? We have 90% English as an additional language, as I've said. We have X amount of additional learning needs. We have a wide variety of challenges going on. But do we always accept that as excuses, or do we continually try to challenge, to strive, to move forward? Do we act on feedback? We expect the children to. Those that taking charge of what they hear, using it to improve. Do we do that as teachers as well within our classrooms? Do we talk enough about learning, not about teaching? Are we, are we looking at the way children learn, the things that go on below that? Some wonderful stuff out there at the moment with Professor Steve Peters now on the chimp management mind model, which explains how the emotions can override how children are learning in class, how we do that as well as teachers. Those of you who know the chimp mind management model, the way that the mind can be hijacked in stressful situations is extremely important, sits below everything that children learn. Do we engage in a dialogue and not just a monologue? Are we involving children in the learning? Are we talking to them? Or do we stand and think that we're the font of all knowledge? Do we show them enough what success looks like? I'm a big proponent of assessment for learning and these types of things. Sitting back in Pentre Harvard School, just outside the city centre in Swansea, as a incomprehensive school where I'd be sitting there with like a C- in my history paper, and Nicola Fredrickson, who's my deputy head in St Helens, she'd be sitting there with an A, and I'd be saying, well, why she got an A, why have I got a C? And they say, well, if only you put this in, if only if you put that in. And I think, well, if you told me that in the first place, then perhaps I could have had a better go at it. So showing what a good one looks like, extremely important for us at St Helens. Relationships, and I think being a head teacher, being a teacher in schools is all about relationships. Going back to when I was an advisor in the local authority in Cardiff, where we used to do a lot of AFL work, and especially in secondary schools, you'd see a lot of these strategies for assessment for learning working. But the conditions in the classrooms often weren't correct because relationships between students weren't good enough. It takes something for somebody to put their hand up and say, I'm struggling with this, I'm having difficulty with that. If somebody's going to laugh at you or not respect that we all feel that way, then that often is going to be, everything else is built on shifting sand coming from there. And are we, as I said, are we focusing on learning continuously? stuck there now. So, as I said to you, partnerships and relationships are essential for us at St Helens. This is some of our dads who are at a football game to get those into the school. As I said, learning and creating a learning community isn't just about you. It's about that wider thing that goes on around the school. With our mums, and some of the things that we found really, really good for developing, relationships in a learning community is kind of putting that collateral back into the community. It's, we think we've moved on from just having parents in to come to classes and then them going away. If we can train parents to work with other parents, then that collateral stays in the community, allows us to support so many different people, especially when we have so many different languages at the school. Often if you arrive new to the country, having a friendly face, somebody who speaks your language, somebody's able to support you, to support your own children is extremely important for us. Dad's extremely important, often forgotten. I think sometimes for us it's been easy to engage some of the mums. Getting dads into the school, some of the things that we've had here, we tried more of the social things. We get football games, we get the Lego, these types of things. And then when you've got a captive audience, it's been a lot easier then to move on to some more of the academic things. Massive work with the community, working with local businesses, working with lots of organisations, and we see some inspirational work from students going on earlier, getting people into school, taking the children out into the community. I mean, our year 4s at the moment, this year is 50 years of Swansea being a city. Part of the celebrations of that is that they're closing off St Helens Road, and those of you know the St Helens Road in Swansea is probably the most multicultural street within the city, with so many different food, restaurants, shops, places to live. That will be closed off this year for a day, and a celebration of the local community will take place. Now our children have been designing that, working with the planners within the City Council, managing the budget for that, booking the performers. So it's been a really, really fantastic real-life project, but working with our community. But that really, really has brought everything that we do to life. Well, sharing good practice is extremely important for us, and I think as we came back to, to what we said at the beginning, it isn't about transplanting what you do into another setting. It's about engaging in a dialogue. Now, I was very, very fortunate to work with another school and to be head teacher of another school back in 2016 for 6 months. And getting our staff and their staff to work together was extremely important. We learned so much working together as a team, that learning community that we were building almost mirrored what we were expecting of the children. Constant improvement for ourselves. You see our staff there working together, challenging one another, having a learning community, modeling, as a mirror to what we expect from the children. And I think to remember, with all of the changes going on at the moment, all of the challenges that we heard, there's a lot to do at the moment. New curriculum, additional learning needs bill, professional standards, even getting the computers to work for the online testing this week. A lot to do. Let's remember, teaching is fun. Working with people and working with amazing colleagues is fantastic. You're going into a wonderful profession. Something that 27 years ago when I was sitting where you are, we didn't have such nice surroundings in those days. It was a lecture theatre in Town Hall. But let's remember, working together, working with fantastic people to make a difference to children in our communities and our schools in a wonderful country of Wales is extremely important. And there's Ellie Christie, the speed skater, because I think one of the things to certainly remember when creating a school that really, really is successful for the children that we teach is that the world is a tough place, and it is hard work, especially when you're trying to do something that's really incredible. And as she says, unfortunately, not everyone who works hard succeeds right away. just because you give it your all doesn't mean that your dreams will come true, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And that's been the thing for us. When I first started in St Helens, somebody said to me, oh, don't ever set the target mark of getting 95% attendance in your school because you're just setting yourself up for failure. Don't expect that these children are ever going to perhaps go to university. And we've worked really, really hard to change those attitudes, and some days have been a lot harder than others. But doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Doesn't mean that you work hard enough as teachers that you can achieve anything that you possibly want to. I always say having the highest expectations, and you know, up here speaking today, when I was a student here in the institute, as it was then, can remember once being told, Mark, you've got fantastic potential within teaching. If you work really, really hard enough, you know, you might even get to be a deputy head one day, but perhaps you might want to consider having elocution lessons. Now, that was, you know, a real driving force for me, and then I was very, very fortunate, those who know me, in 2017, and I was, you know, Welsh Head Teacher of the Year, which for somebody who needed elocution lessons wasn't a bad crack, really. So it has, we have a wonderful effect on children's lives. I think, don't ever forget the shadow that we cast, because that's extremely important. And just to remember, school is popular, learning is fun, learning new things is extremely important, and one of the most wonderful things that children will ever experience, and the best things that we would ever do as teachers as well. If you want to check out the type of things that do go on at St Helens, school is popular, and it's down to the wonderful people like yourselves that I work with and collaborate alongside on a daily basis. They make such a difference, you make such a difference. And as I said, consistency of principle, not consistency always of practice. Everybody learns from one another. Everybody models themselves on what we expect of the children. And that really is how we've created a learning community at St Helens Primary.